Is CISPA the next SOPA? You may have seen this headline making its way across the internet in the last week or so. So tonight, we want to clear a few things up. Now, no, the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act, better known as CISPA, it's not the next SOPA. But the truth is that it's even scarier. Now, we spoke about it just last week, and it's just one of several competing cybersecurity bills making their way through Congress. But CISPA specifically is a House version, and it's the worst of them all. Under the veil of doing things for cybersecurity purposes, a very broad and vague definition, it would allow companies to collect and monitor private communications and then share those with the government and anybody else. But you can compare it to SOPA in the sense that it's already starting to anger a large portion of the internet community. You see, in the past, we've told you about how private companies like ISPs, Facebook, other telecoms have been gathering information about you to share with third parties. Then, of course, thanks to the Patriot Act, the government has the ability to do all kinds of monitoring, including the authority to intercept wire, oral, and electronic communications, as long as it's for the sake of fighting terrorism. But CISPA would add a brand new Orwellian dimension where the government's intelligence firms can work with private companies to collect your personal information, and the law doesn't even specify where that information would go, as in which particular government agency. So that means that it could end up in the hands of the NSA or another military agency for all we know. And let's face it, they're probably the ones who would want this information the most. Oh, did I mention, if you're being watched, you probably wouldn't even know about it. Now, you probably already have lots of questions, right? So what will get you monitored? What type of private information can be monitored? What can the government do with it once it actually has that information? Well, frankly, we have a lot of questions because as of now, the language in this bill is so incredibly vague. According to the bill, theft or misappropriation of private or government information, intellectual property, or personally identifiable information, all of that can get your information collected. So that opens up a lot of doors. And as Trevor Chim brought up last week, it lets the U.S. conveniently overlook privacy laws because, hey, after all, they say that they're on the lookout to keep you safe.
So what it does is it essentially carves out a cybersecurity exception to all of our privacy laws. And then once it gets to the government, all of this information, your communications, your private communications, we don't know exactly where it goes or what they're using it for. We don't know which agency it goes to or whether they're allowed to share between agencies, whether they're allowed to use this information for other than cybersecurity purposes like normal criminal investigations. And we know in the Rogers bill that the NSA is probably going to be one of the biggest benefactors.
Good to know, right? The government could monitor, share, even hold on to any and all communications that were discovered by private companies. And we don't even know where it'll go. Now, it's this broad language that has so many people so worried. Anonymous is just one of the many critics out there of H.R. 3523, pointing out that it allows the government to interpret the law in such a number of degrees that any online communication could be suspect and thus unknowingly monitored. But I guess that we can't be too shocked by this legislation. After all, cybercrime has been declared enemy #1 here in D.C. And surprise, surprise, lawmakers that are heading up these cyber war committees are also the ones co-sponsoring this bill. Both Dutch Ruppersberger and Mike Rogers are ranking members of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. And Rogers explained that he's backing this bill because every day, U.S. businesses are targeted by nation-state actors like China for cyber exploitation and theft. The broad base of support for this bill shows that Congress recognizes the urgent need to help our private sector better defend itself from these insidious attacks. How convenient, right? You throw in a little line about China being the bad guys and the fear-mongering the crap out of politicians until they sign onto this bill. But sadly, that's kind of what's happening thus far. This bill already has 100 sponsors. After all, you don't want to be caught speaking out against national security. And those aren't the only politicians in favor of CISPA. There are a large number of corporations that are voicing their support. See, Facebook, Microsoft, Verizon, and IBM, they're all amongst the corporations who think that CISPA is a good idea. According to Andrew Coots over at Digital Trends, the reason that they're in favor of this bill over SOPA or PIPA, well, it all comes down to business. See, if you remember, SOPA would essentially force companies to police the web, hunt down pirates, putting the onus on them. So, of course, they said no. But CISPA is different. It'll actually make life easier for those companies because they're not responsible for finding anything. They would be protected against any personal lawsuits from privacy advocates because, well, this would be the law. Plus, they'd be part of the bigger plan to stop any cybersecurity threats, so politically, this is a win-win for them. So let's get back to the original question here. Is CISPA the new SOPA? Well, not really. A number of tech companies are actually backing this bill, unlike SOPA. And although some are concerned that CISPA could even be interpreted to go after copyright infringement, it doesn't stop there. This thing is about security and not just piracy. And when it comes to those congressional signatures, SOPA had about 80 supporters until the internet blackout on January 19th forced them to change their minds. But both bills have raised the ire of the internet community for their alarmingly broad language when it comes to monitoring the internet. Sadly, though, we haven't seen the same outcry over this bill that we saw when it came to SOPA. Thankfully, though, advocacy groups out there and Anonymous do continue their campaign against H.R. 3523.
Given the speed that the latest censorship bill could sneak through Congress, however, anyone concerned over the future of the internet should be on the lookout for CISPA as it continues to be considered on Capitol Hill.
And in fact, Anon has already hacked into 2 companies that have openly backed CISPA. But the real question here is, can anything be done to stop this legislation? Can the internet community perform another SOPA miracle without the help of the major tech companies to kill this bill before it becomes law? Well, I guess we're just going to have to wait and see.